Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to our second edition of Breaking News for this Sunday, the 26th day of October, 2025. And it seems like the primary players in the Trump peace plan are getting very impatient. Let's look at the headlines. First, from the Times of Israel, we're told that Israel pressed the U.S. to give Hamas a firm deadline to comply with the deal, says an Israeli source. Then from JFeed N12, we read that Trump's $70 billion Gaza plan collapses. The Gulf state is delivering an ultimatum to the U.S. and Israel to get the show on the road. All right. And then from N12 JFeed, we have this story. Haven't heard this anywhere else. 30 days of doom. U.S. delivers warning to Israel on Gaza ceasefire. In other words, they got to keep quiet for 30 days to let this thing play out, phase two. But then, on the other hand, from Israel National News, Netanyahu says Israel controls its own security, not the U.S. So, who's telling the truth? What's going on? We seem to have contradictory messages coming from everywhere. So, let's look at them, see if we can figure all this out. All right, first of all, the headline from the Times of Israel. Israel pressed U.S. to give Hamas a firm deadline to comply with the deal, says Israeli source. Israel was concerned about U.S. President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance's refusal to put a deadline on Hamas's compliance with the Gaza ceasefire deal last week, an Israeli source tells the Times of Israel. In an October 21st Truth Social post, Trump wrote that the regional actors in Israel were threatening to punish Hamas, but he told them not yet, all uppercase letters. There is still hope that Hamas will do what is right. Actually, there's no hope, but that's what he said. Vance said in Israel the same day that I'm not going to do what the President of the United States has thus far refused to do, which is to put an explicit deadline on it because of a lot of this stuff is difficult. Israel expressed its concern to senior U.S. officials in recent days, says the source, and found sympathy from its American interlocutors. On Saturday, Trump set a firm deadline. That was yesterday. We mentioned this, warning that he would be watching Hamas's action very closely over the next 48 hours. Israel is trying to ensure that it and Washington are on the same page as much as possible, says the source, including on foreign involvement in Gaza. Israel doesn't like the fact that Qatar and Turkey are involved, says the source, but they very much like the fact that Egypt is involved and want to expand the Egyptian involvement. In fact, there's another story about Egypt becoming more involved in Qatar and Turkey are going by the wayside. All right. Well, as we saw in our first broadcast, Trump has given Hamas 48 hours to make progress in the return of the deceased Israeli hostages. Let's see if Hamas complies. But then we have this problem. Headline number two, Trump's $70 billion Gaza plan collapses! Exclamation point. Gulf states deliver ultimatum to U.S. and Israel. This is from JFeed or N12, an Israeli source here. Now, this one's very fascinating. It's got a lot of complications, as we will see. Gulf nations are demanding political guarantees before funding Trump's proposed $70 billion Gaza reconstruction, including Hamas disarmament and Palestinian Authority reforms. A good look on each of those. U.S. President Donald Trump's ambitious claim that the Arab nations have pledged tremendous amounts of money for Gaza's estimated $70 billion reconstruction is facing significant resistance, with major Gulf donors demanding firm political guarantees before committing the funds. This is what Bloomberg reports. Despite the collective endorsement of the peace plan, the key regional players, Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, are pushing back, signaling that the reconstruction effort will be contingent upon major concessions, both the future of Gaza and Israel's long-term compliance regarding these two subjects, the future of Gaza and Israel's long-term compliance. And then we have listed, this is fascinating, the Gulf's non-negotiable conditions. Everybody's got their non-negotiable conditions, right? Their red lines. According to reporting by Bloomberg, convincing the Gulf states to release the funds for the massive rebuilding effort estimated by the UN is proving difficult as they prioritize political clarity over blank checks. First of all, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. Here's their hard line. A senior UAE official informed Bloomberg that Abu Dhabi demands three non-negotiable conditions before committing funds: Hamas's full disarmament, its exclusion from governing Gaza, and the Palestinian Authority overhaul. An advisor, Anwar Gargash, also noted that UAE is hesitant without a longer-term view towards a Palestinian state. Well, there we go. Number one, red line for the UAE to give any money. Then we go to Qatar. Qatar demands Israeli compliance. They're a pivotal mediator in the conflict. They're the richest of all the countries, too. It's focusing its leverage on Israel. Bloomberg learned that Doha wants concrete guarantees that Israel will implement its side of the peace deal before it commits any money. I'm not specifying what all that means. It's interesting that they've said that. And then finally, Saudi Arabia's caution. Saudi Arabia, facing financial constraints and wary of past corruption, is expected to press Qatar and the UAE to shoulder the bulk of the funding. Ali Shahibai explained to Bloomberg that Riyadh is allergic to writing blank checks, citing past aid abuses. Now, Hamas's future remains the red line, is what we find. The reluctance across the Gulf is rooted in the fundamental fear that any investment will be wasted if the region descends back into hostilities. They won't put their money into Gaza unless they are first sure that this won't happen again. Yasmin Farouk of the International Crisis Group told Bloomberg this entails getting guarantees from both Hamas and Israel. While Arab states generally accept Hamas's exclusion from temporary leadership, a senior Arab official told Bloomberg that totally removing the terror group, which still controls nearly half of Gaza from political life, remains unrealistic. Let's say that again. Removing the terror group from controlling part of Gaza or half of Gaza from all control is unrealistic. The potential continued involvement remains a red line for Israel and the U.S., given the attack on October 7, 2023. But these Arab states generally accept the exclusion of Hamas's temporary leadership, but they're saying removing them completely is unrealistic. Very interesting comment, isn't it? Trump is expected to lean heavily on Qatar for a significant portion of the funding, but Firas Maksad of the Eurasia Group warned Bloomberg that Doha will demand influence. Qatar wants influence and a say in Gaza, Maksad said, adding, that's going to be problematic for Israel. It certainly is, because Israel's not going to let Qatar call the shots. As a former Jordanian minister, Ibrahim Saif said, summarized the situation to Bloomberg, it's easy to pledge funding, but realizing it is something else. With Egypt set to host a reconstruction conference next month, the pressing questions of post-war Israeli compliance and Hamas's disarmament are currently taking precedence over the simple flow of cash. Well, you'd think so. The takeaway from this is that these nations will pull out from financing the reconstruction of the hostilities, reconstruction, if the hostilities between Israel and Hamas returns. And herein lies the major problems. If Hamas does not disarm, all right, then either Israel engages with them in battle, or there will be pressure upon Israel to make some kind of deal which would allow Hamas to still exist and have some sort of control over Gaza. Now, here's the statement I hate to make, but I'm going to make it anyway because it may come about. Do not be surprised if this sort of compromise will be put forward if Hamas remains defiant. In other words, if Hamas will not disarm, if they remain defiant, they must be in some type of control over Gaza, then Israel may be forced to compromise here. The pressure will be on Israel, not to pick up fighting again, because remember they said if the hostilities resume, they're out of it. That these Arab countries, so the onus will be on Israel. Israel has to compromise, and again, the compromise will be moving towards a Palestinian state, whether it be with Hamas, the PA, or whatever it might be. So anyway, Israel is not in a good position here, as we've been saying. All right, but then we have this, and this is a new one on me. Headline number 3 from N12 JFeed also. 30 days of doom. The U.S. delivers warning to Israel on Gaza ceasefire. Senior American officials delivered a stark message to Israel last week, emphasizing that the next 30 days of the ceasefire agreement are crucial to the success of the U.S. brokered truce in Gaza. An Israeli source has informed the Times of Israel. The warning underscores Washington's significant investment in maintaining the fragile cessation of hostilities, even as the agreement faces strain from ongoing violations by Hamas. There is a call for a proportional response, we're told. The primary concern conveyed by the American delegation centers on Israel's operational response to potential breaches of the agreement. That's why they want Israel to respond in a proportionate manner, the Israeli source explained, referring specifically to any violations committed by Hamas. The message urges Israeli restraint, aiming to prevent escalation that could derail the broader diplomatic process. The urgency was amplified by the recent presence of top White House officials in Israel, including Vice President J.D. Vance. Their mission was explicitly to secure the longevity of the ceasefire, even following a deadly Hamas attack on the IDF troops and the terror group's failure to return all the remains of the slain hostages as negotiated. So there's a direct message to Netanyahu. The demand for prudence was reportedly delivered to him directly by senior advisors Kushner and Witkoff. The advisors have said to have stressed, do not act in a way, this is to Netanyahu, that would endanger the ceasefire. We want to do everything to reach the second phase. The focus on reaching the second phase suggests that the U.S. is pushing for further negotiations, potentially involving an expanded exchange of hostages or a longer-term security arrangement, and views the current 30-day window as the critical period to stabilize the current truce and build momentum toward a more lasting diplomatic outcome. All right, that's the article. So here's my question. So what's going to happen in the next 30 days that will move Trump along to phase two? Even if the remainder of the deceased hostages are returned, there is still the issue of Hamas disarming, a seeming impossibility, not to mention the problem of finding some neutral Arab force to replace them to rule in Gaza. And finally, headline number 4. Netanyahu in all this has this to say. Israel controls its own security, not the U.S. It's from Israel National News. Prime Minister Netanyahu dismissed the claims of U.S. control over Israeli defense policy, stressing that Israel acts independently and does not ask permission to defend itself. At the start of the weekly cabinet meeting today, Sunday, Netanyahu addressed claims regarding American involvement in Israeli security policy. Over the past month, we have been witnessing ridiculous claims regarding the relationship between the United States and Israel. When I was in Washington, it was said that I control the American administration, that I dictated security policy to it. Now, the opposite is being claimed, that the American administration controls me and dictates Israel's security policy. Neither of these is true, the prime minister insisted. He stressed, Israel is an independent country. The United States is an independent country. The relations between us are relations between partners, and this partnership, which has reached an all-time high, was also expressed in the operational cooperation in the second part of the Operation Rising Lion. That's what took out the Iranians there. All right. It was also expressed, as was expressed just recently, in the release of all the living hostages from Gaza and the course in the effort to return all the fallen and all the other areas. We are changing the face of the Middle East together. So he says, we're working together. We're changing the face of the Middle East. All right. These are strong words from Netanyahu. But here's the question. Will he be forced to make compromises to the red lines that he has set down from the beginning? Will he continue the fight if Hamas does not disarm? Or will he be told not to do this, but rather make some sort of deal? There are a tremendous number of possibilities here, and nobody knows exactly how this all is going to eventually turn out. So as you see from these 4 headlines, everybody seems to be going in different directions, demanding this, getting some type of answers. And Hamas just sitting there, not responding, refusing to disarm, and by drips and drabs, releasing some of the bodies of the dead hostages. So we wait and see what's going to find out next. It's a very, very fluid situation. It's a difficult situation, and nobody knows how it's going to end. So we'll be here to help you with it and to give you the latest. I'm Don Stewart, as always. Thanks for watching. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.